Thanks so much for agreeing to this one, Anthony. Been looking forward to it. Been looking forward to it for quite some time. For our audience, I think many people will know who you are. However, for those that don't, would you do me the honor of introducing yourself, please?
Hello, I'm Anthony. I used to head up BBC iPlayer. After the BBC, I built a startup, sold it, built another startup, sold it, invested in a few, got tired of paying lawyers, met my co-founder, genius ex-VC and serial angel investor, Laurent Laffy. We met at a party and we decided to change, that people would need to go to lawyers for funding rounds. So we started SeedLegals. So I'm founder and CEO at SeedLegals. We're about 160 people. About 1 in 3 of all first funding rounds in the UK is on our platform. A good fraction of all share option schemes on our platform, and tens of thousands of founders and investors use SeedLegals to raise money, build their teams, and do their investments.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, I think a lot of the people that we work with are familiar with SeedLegals, both from candidates' perspective and also our partners, our clients. Today, we're going to be focusing primarily on share options, primarily from the candidate's perspective, like what they should look out for, some do's and don'ts, but also from the employer and founder's perspective, why they're a good thing and how they can help with talent attraction and retention and so on. Just connecting your founding story to share options. How does SeedLegals, you touched on it just now, help people with that element of their working life?
Well, so there's always this perception that share option schemes and EMI are vastly complicated. The problem is that the EMI valuation, we'll talk about that in a minute, is an accounting problem, and the share option schemes are a legal problem. And because it's expensive and difficult, many founders never get round to creating an option scheme, which is the worst of both worlds. For the employees, it can be a benefit, and for them, it can be a benefit for attracting talent. So we aim to make it much, much easier. So should I go through the 101 of an option scheme? I'll explain how it works from the company side, and for you as an employee, the things to look out for, and the things that will make it attractive or less attractive.
Yeah,
so here goes.
Absolutely. I think in share options right now, they may be taken in terms of PR, they're less impactful, definitely from a candidate's perspective because of the financial climate. So now more than ever, we really need to sell the benefits of them because they are still super valuable. So yes, maybe like a brief kind of snapshot of what exactly they are. So many people don't actually know from a candidate's perspective.
So firstly, I think we've all heard of the US companies with stock options here. They're called share options. So in order to, usually you're going to give somebody some money and they're going to do some work for you. But you want to, either you don't have enough money to pay the market rates in the early stage of your company, or you want to make life exciting, because if we sell for $1 zillion later, you'll make hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands or whatever it might be. So can I give you some equity in my company? So can I just give you some shares? So in the UK, giving an employee shares in your company is a very bad idea. You shouldn't do this because it becomes an employee-related security. And for the company, they will have to pay PAYE and national insurance as if they had given the employee that amount in cash. So if I give you £20,000 of shares in my company, the company will have a tax liability, and worse, the employee, you'll have a tax liability for shares that you can't sell anytime soon. So companies should never give employees shares, and instead they'll give them share options. So what's a share option? A share option is a right for you to buy a share later at a price that we agree now. So let's say I give you the right to buy shares in my company at 20p a share, and the shares in a few years' time will be worth £3 a share. So in a few years' time, you'll give me 30p for each share where you want to exercise your option, and I'll give you a share that's worth £3. Now, usually you'll only want to do this at the time you're planning to sell the share at the same time, in which case, basically, you can do almost a back-to-back transaction and just pocket £2.70 per share, and you'll pay no tax when I give you the option now, And of course, you'll pay tax later. So now the next thing is the UK is one of few countries in the world to have really tax beneficial share scheme for employees. And it's called an EMI scheme. It only works if you're a UK taxpayer, employee, and an employee, not advisors and others. And if you're an employee, when you get EMI, which stands for Enterprise Management Initiative to incentivize management, but it's all employees, you'll pay no tax when the company gives you the share option. And later on, when you exercise it, provided you and the company have met the relevant conditions, you'll pay only 10% capital gains tax when you sell the shares later. So it's fantastic. The company has an exit or there's a future funding round and they let you exercise your options.
So 10%, Anthony, just so I get that right. So even if they go up in value 100x, you pay 10% on the difference of the increase. That's it.
Exactly.
So if you make 100
shares,
if they go up by 100k, you pay 10k on that, and that's it.
Exactly.
Right. Okay.
And no income tax. So it's hugely beneficial. It's a great way to get money later. Of course, it assumes that the value of the shares go up and so on. So there are different types of share schemes around. There's a CSOP, and you might hear ESOP and various others. Either of these are US names, or they're things that are sometimes for bigger companies. So an EMI scheme is only possible for companies with fewer than 250 employees.
Right.
If you're working for Revolut or somebody, they can't do EMI scheme anymore. They've got CSOPs, which are less good. But here I'm going to focus on EMI schemes.
Sure.
So vast majority of startups are under 250 people and will qualify for EMI. So the EMI scheme is the most tax advantageous. And so if you're an employee, you're very likely in any small to medium-sized company to get these EMI options. And so now when you get options, there are actually only a few things to ask about and to look for, because it really is, although the legals is lots of paperwork, the variables, the choices are few.
Yeah.
And they really fall into three things. Number one is over how many years will your options vest? Number two, when can you exercise your options? And number three, when you exercise them, how much will you pay, being the EMI valuation? Okay, so let's go through those.
Sure.
So when it comes to giving options to employees, there are broadly two schools of thought in terms of the vesting period. So what is vesting? So if I'm employing you as a developer in my company, I don't give you your entire annual salary on January the 1st. I pay you each month because as you do work, I give you more money. Makes sense. Likewise, if I'm giving you share options, I'm not going to go, here's 1,000 options that are just yours on day one, and then you leave a week later and you keep your 1,000 options. It's a bad deal. So I'm going to say, I'm giving you 1,000 options, but you're going to get them in tranches over the next few years. So if you stay with me for 3 years, you keep all of them. And if you leave after 1 year, you're going to give 2/3 back and you're going to keep 1/3 of them. So this is vesting. And generally, there are two vesting patterns. I mean, you can set it over 10 years or 1 year or 38 days or something, but it almost always falls into one or two patterns, which is 3-year straight line or 4-year with a 1-year cliff. So what does this mean? So 3-year straight line vesting means, let's say I'm giving you 1,000 share options. And if you stay with me for 3 months, that's a quarter of the first year, a third overall. So you're going to get, after 3 months, you'll own 1/12 of them. And after 6 months, you'll own more. So, and if you leave, you'll typically keep that amount that's vested. So the good news for you is if you leave after 6 months, you're still going to keep something.
Yeah.
But for the company, that can lead to employees you've hired that just don't really work out. So, Bob stayed for 3 months. It was painful getting rid of him. Didn't work at all. Shit, why'd I have to give them options? So the alternative is it vests over 4 years and there's a 1-year cliff, which means if you leave any time in the first year, you keep nothing. And at the end of the first year, it immediately jumps to 25%, which is like that's the cliff, and then it goes up after that. So which is right for you? Well, here's my take, which is if it's if you're hired by a company and it's really early days and they can't pay you market salary and you're getting topped up with options to reflect the difference between what you can get paid and your market salary. So let's say as a software engineer, you might, think you'll get 70K salary and the company can only pay you 40K because they don't have much money. Then I think it makes sense that the options, which are sacrificing salary almost, if you stay for 6 months, you should still keep some of your options. Mm-hmm. But if the company is later stage, seed or Series A, and it can essentially pay you market rate, the options are just a sweetener. You're not out of pocket by working at the company.
Yeah.
So there you might say, okay, double or quits. If I'm around for later, then I keep my options. And if I leave, it's not the end of the world. Okay. So that's vesting.
So just on those two. So earlier stage, maybe less financially buoyant companies are the candidate is taking, the new hire is taking a little bit of a hit financially. Therefore, they should benefit straight away if they do leave or something changes. So no cliff for you. Your take would be it's better for the earlier smaller businesses, and for later stage 4 years with a cliff is probably more suitable.
Yes, and I think the goals of the employer and the employee sometimes align, which is we'd like to motivate you to stay with the company, we'd like to not bankrupt the company, we'd like to use equity that excites everybody, the founders of equity themselves. But in some cases, the goals don't align. The company wants to protect itself if the employee doesn't work out and get the options back again. And the employee might go, well, if it didn't work out, I still want to keep something because otherwise I keep changing careers every year and I never get anything. So, I'm not saying here what's right or wrong, but I'm helping you understand the lay of the land so you can negotiate wisely. Okay.
Right.
So the first thing was vesting. And the vesting says when you essentially have the right to your shares. And you with the right to exercise them. And that means you're going to give the company a bit of money, which we'll get to in a moment, and then you'll own the share, and then you can sell the share or keep it as you may wish.
Yeah.
And this is called exercising your option. So the question is, when can you exercise? So at first, you might go, oh, why can't I exercise as soon as any of them have vested? So after a month, I've got 28 vested, and now I'm going to exercise them. But this would actually drive the company insane, because every time someone exercises their shares, you need board resolutions, and then you have to file things with Company House for the allocation of the shares, and then you may need to do a notification to HMRC that in the annual return that the shares have been exercised, and there's quite a lot of admin overhead. So if the company's got 100 employees, and they let them exercise whenever they want, I mean, a sensible person would not exercise until later, because when you exercise, you have to give the company some money, and they give you the shares. But unless you intend to sell the shares, you've just spent your money on something that may or may not ever have a value later. So rationally, it makes no sense to exercise your options until you leave the company or there's an exit event and you can sell the shares. But some people don't know that, and they think, the shares are better than share options. I want to exercise them. So if the company let people exercise at any time, they'd probably go insane by, every few weeks, somebody would want to exercise their options. And so the companies usually create an exercise window. And they might say, it could be one of a few things. It might say, hey team, everyone can exercise their options, but you can only do it each January in a few days, so that I'm only doing one set of Company House filings and updates and HMRC updates and so on. Or they might say, you can only exercise your options when you leave the company, because we don't want employees as shareholders, because it creates a nuisance. You now have to get shareholder updates, and that's for investors, not employees. So pattern number 2 is only when you leave the company can you exercise. And in fact, you have to exercise, because one of the rules of the EMI scheme is you have to exercise your options within 90 days of leaving, or you lose them.
Right.
So they lapse. So that's pattern number 2, which is quite common. And the third pattern is what's called an exit-only scheme. And this says if you leave the company before the company's acquired and exits to an acquirer, you lose everything. And if you're there at the time of acquisition, then you make hopefully an excellent amount of money on the sale of your options and shares now. So this is quite interesting. And I think it's like a double or quits. So the idea is, as the founders, you're thinking, I want my team to be with us on the rocket ride until we reach Mars. I don't want you coming on the rocket and then like leaving partway. The Mars analogy is no good here. Maybe cruise ship. I don't want you getting off at other ports along the way. I want you to get with the destination. So as a team, we're all together to the destination. And if you leave earlier, you lose everything. And I quite like that double or quits approach. Of course, for an employee, the question is it really an incentive? Because you're working for the company, but you know if you leave, you'll lose everything. On the flip side, for people who stay, the company can maybe give them twice as many options as they would have gotten otherwise, because they know that some people are going to leave beforehand. So what makes sense of these different exercise approaches? And I would say the starting point is that the median time for a company to exit the startup is 5 to 7 years. Sometimes it's a lot longer, sometimes sooner. Sometimes the exits are good, sometimes the exits are bad. But if you think it's like 5 to 7 years for a company to have an exit, then I would say for the initial joiners in the company, an exit-only scheme is quite a gamble, because you'd have to be with the company like statistically for 5 to 7 years. That's a long time.
Average tenure in startups is 18 months.
Exactly. Welcome to London startup scene. Exactly. So, however, if you're joining the company after their Series A round and they're 4 or 5 years in, actually, it might only be a few years until an exit. So an exit-only scheme might make sense. So I think that a good approach for a company is your first joiners might get 3-year straight line vesting and exercise anytime you want, or exercise like after the first year or something like that. And then for you, and they're only going to be a small number, like the first 10 people or something like that, or 20 people. And then after that, as you reach year 3 or 4, you may switch to an exit-only scheme as the high stakes, double or quits poker game, which is, I know that some fraction of the team will leave sooner, but the ones who stay, I can now give them more options because the others have, it's like the gym. I can sell more gym memberships because I know not everyone's going to be at the gym at the same time. So that's all about exercising. So when you get an option grant proposal from a company, you should look at it to see what the exercise and the vesting are. And those are the key things for you. Yeah. There are a lot of other little gotchas and legalese, and it's buried in 30 pages. If your company that is sending you your option scheme has done it on SeedLegals, because the legals are quite complicated and impenetrable, we include a very nice cover letter that says, "Dear Bob, you're getting this many options.
Here's what this means.
Number of years." Exactly. So it's in plain English. And the cover letter, and then you can read all the legalese afterwards. Okay.
It's just on all those just frameworks there are so important, Anthony, because we are going into these situations, or our candidates are at least, with, like you said, all this legalese to unpack. They don't really know where to look for help or assistance. And even online, the sources of information are densely packed with information also. So you've got two things to unpack now. So super helpful. And I think especially the way you framed it in terms of company stage is a really, really good framework for people to bear in mind.
But now one interesting thing is, are options valuable? And here's something I found intriguing. So, we've all read in the US with companies with like unicorn billion-dollar exits, but they're very uncommon in the UK. In fact, they're very uncommon everywhere. You just read them on TechCrunch or Twitter because those are the ones that make the news. But the median exit for a company in the UK is something like £20 million. So the reality is you're unlikely to be a millionaire from it happens, but it's unlikely.
Right.
And more likely, you might make 20 or 30 or 50,000 pounds on an exit of the company from your options, which is great. So I think what happens is, in the UK, that founders value the options they're giving more than employees. And in the US, it said, employees go, I'll take less cash, give me options. In the UK, I think the standard pattern is, okay, dude, give me my market rate salary. And if you give me options, awesome. So I think the pattern you have is that when candidates are looking for jobs, they're going to look more for ones or be incentivized for ones that promise options. So options are a great acquisition means, but they're probably less good of a retainer, because once you've got your options, you go, great, then you look at the company and you see how long it's going to take, and you put a value on it, and you might go, well, I could make 20 or 30K, which is nice, but, not going to change my life completely. I mean, if you're an early joiner and you're getting a lot of options, then it could be significant. And some of our early joiners at SeedLegals, their options are worth hundreds of thousands of pounds. So, late joiners would be less. So you've got, so you might, anyway, what I find is that in the UK, employees typically go, give me a market rate. And if you give me some options, that's awesome. So you're not valuing them that highly, but they're a nice top up and a nice way to gamify things and keep things interesting and have the company, see that they love you and so on. So let's talk very quickly about this EMI option valuation, because it's it's technical. It sounds like it's of no interest, but it's actually quite important.
Okay.
So what happens is in the UK, to get these fabulous tax benefits, only 10% capital gains tax, you have to exercise your options within 90 days of leaving a company. So if you quit or you're fired and you've got some options, assuming they're not exit only, assuming you can keep them, you now have to exercise them. And when you exercise them, you have to pay the company the exercise price. And then once you've done that, you'll own the shares, and then hopefully you'll sell the shares. Or maybe you want to keep the shares, depends if there's an opportunity to sell the shares. Unlike something on the London Stock Exchange, you can sell at any time because it's a liquid market. In a private company, if you want to sell your shares tomorrow, well, who are you going to sell it to? So you normally have to wait until either the company is about to be sold or there's a new funding round when somebody's looking to buy shares, and then you can sell yours. So what this means is after leaving the company, you now have to write a check or wire money to the company to exercise your options. Otherwise, you'll lose them. So how much do you have to pay for them? Well, when the company creates an EMI scheme and does a grant of options to you, you have to go to HMRC to agree an EMI valuation. And when the company's super young and hasn't raised funding yet, your valuation you might see is pretty much zero. But after the first funding round, let's say you've raised investment at £5 million valuation, you might be able to agree with HMRC that the exercise price for the EMI option should be done at a £2 million valuation instead of $5 billion. So it's less than the funding round valuation, in other words, when you join, but not zero. And this means that for many employees, when you exercise your options, you have to write a check to the company or wire them funds for a few £100 to a few £1,000. And I think the median is sort of £3,000 to £5,000, depending on how many options you've got and how many are vested and so on. So your problem is you're leaving the company. Maybe you've got a fabulous new job offer, or maybe you don't. Maybe you have £3,000 to essentially speculatively exercise the options. But if you don't, the challenge is you now lose your options. So it becomes the worst of both worlds. So the goal for the company is to secure the lowest possible EMI valuation with HMRC, which means when you exercise the options, you have to pay less as opposed to more. And on your side, of course, you've got a gamble to make. Do I exercise and maybe make a large amount later, or do I not exercise and lose them? And your choice at that time is probably going to be driven by, well, am I confident in the company? Maybe I left because I think they're going downhill. That's no good. Or maybe I'm pissed off because they fired me and I don't want to give them any money. Or maybe I think they're awesome And I totally am. And it may
Exactly.
sit there for a few years, but maybe my investment of $3,000 is going to give me 30 grand or more later. So it's a fantastic deal. Anyway, so you do have this gamble to make at some point when you leave the company. At other times, you might exercise while you're still an employee, and you just pick the time that you'll be able to sell some shares. And selling your shares is often called a secondary transaction. So when a company raises money, investors give the company money, they issue new shares. That's called a primary transaction. But now that people have shares and they want to sell their shares to somebody else, that's a secondary.
Yeah.
So we're going to see over the coming years more and more the rise of platforms that are facilitating secondary transactions to bring liquidity into the space.
So ex-employee for SeedLegals has some shares that they've bought, but they want to sell them. No one's buying at the moment. You're thinking platforms that connect buyers and sellers. Probably another ex-employee of another startup is interested in buying those shares, because that's a bit of a risk, isn't it? Giving the company money as they exit, and then they're like, no one's buying. I've bought shares in a private company that no one's interested in. That's an interesting challenge.
Exactly. So there's the the gamification of it, you might say. I think that's your 101 for an employee.
Thank you so much.
What share option schemes and the value of the options to you as well.
Yeah, I think super comprehensive compared to the layperson's knowledge of share options, Anthony, including my own. I obviously did a bit of research for this one, but it's really nice to have that laid out. My partner, different stage of company, not startups, but she's just been given this broad range of information that she also needs to make decisions on. So I'm gonna share your words with her. I want to connect it a little bit to my world a bit. So we touched on it a little bit in terms of its appeal for its tool as a talent attraction mechanism. You mentioned it already. Like in the UK, it's seen as a bit of a sugar on top to acquire talent rather than kind of we'll give you a bit more now, but you take a bit of a hit. But I understand that mechanism, and I've seen it in play. Is there any other ways that they can be leveraged to attract talent if we're focusing on early stage businesses?
Well, it's a good point. I think for based on my talking to lots of employees, and we employ 150 plus people at SeedLegals, some people value options a lot and some people don't. I think one of the principal problems is some people have no idea what they are. Some people are super tech savvy and spend their time on TechCrunch and, watch, Silicon Valley programs and so on, and they're obsessed with options. But to me, I think in the UK, people, again, take it as a nice top up. So, the options are one thing you can do to help entice employees. But I think, employees are probably making their key decisions as does the company look like a happening company that's growing? Do I like the values and the mission and the purpose of the company? Do I like the team? And so the options will be one part of something. But, I'm constantly super impressed that people are, delighted to join our company, take a hefty pay cut because they didn't want to work at a law firm or whatever, and they want to work at a startup. So, the thing I learned some time ago is that what often happens in a company is you've got your design team, you're obsessed with making your homepage awesome and all your product pages awesome. And then it comes to your workable page or your careers page, and that's made by the HR team and looks like a Russian submarine from the late 1980s and looks appalling. Yeah, it's got no design love, no purpose and mission. And so the number one thing for companies is they need to focus at least as much on their careers page as really on their home page.
100%.
It needs to be beautifully styled. It needs to show the mission and purpose, not just say we're hiring 3 years JavaScript.
Here's the rest of the roles. Anthony, just a quick one on the. So I think it's an advantage for employees when they're in a business that's offered them a share option scheme. I think this move for transparency in organizations now that's taking hold is obviously beneficial to employees to make informed decisions about whether to exercise or not. When they do have shares, when they're in part of a share option scheme, is there a requirement from the business to provide financial performance updates to them so they can make better decisions about whether or not to exercise?
The answer is no, not related to share options. The business separately might want to have updates to employees. So,
of course, I know it's good practice, but are they legally obliged to now that this person has literally a vested interest in that?
Right.
I wondered if that's like a dynamic that's come up.
Yeah, and the answer is no. And I should tell you that for the founders, it's quite problematic. Yeah, well, it's a tricky dynamic because if you don't excite your team with the business's prospects and growth and so on, then people lose interest and motivation.
Yeah.
On the flip side, if you dial it up too much, you can create the wrong dynamic. And I'll give you an example. A couple of startups ago, my team said, "Hey, what's the value of our options?" And so I went, "Well, if the company's worth X valuation, I mean, we had a funding round at this valuation. It's been a little while. Business is good, but I'm running out of money a bit. So I reckon the valuation is about X. And so your options are worth about this amount." And they went, "Oh, that's great. Can we get an update every month?" And I went, "Sure, why not?" And it turned out to be a terrible thing to do because each month, I mean, you have a funding round, and then a year or two might go by, and you have another funding round. But the company doesn't have a valuation in the meantime. But because I'd sort of volunteered this, my team were putting me on point each month to like make up a company valuation, and then exactly, and oh shit, the value of my options had gone down by £100 since last month. So I learned that trying to be in a mode of trying to guess something every month is not good. But what I do know is at SeedLegals, if a company's done its option scheme on SeedLegals, the employee has a dashboard that's created, and you as the employee can log in. You can enter any valuation you want. So you can ask the company what the valuation might be, or you can just have fun and pick
they can model it themselves.
Tell you. Exactly. And it works out the exercise price and the tax and things like that, and then tells you the value of your options at different valuations. And now, of course, it's between you and the company to see when it might give updates. But realistically, companies only really have a valuation, startups, when you're about to do or have just done a funding round or on a sale of the company. Yep. And in the meantime, it's like either the last valuation or at some point potentially the next valuation or some sort of slope in between. But it's just
it is guesswork. Right. Understood.
Yes.
And just want to connect a little bit to broadly and hiring yourself, Anthony. You've touched on the fact that you're at 160 employees. Obviously, we partnered with you for a period of that growth. I think we started working with you 72 people. I'd like to ask you, as a founder who's grown several startups and exited a few, and still, heavily involved at SeedLegals and the management of your, I assume, the leadership team. What do you think are the biggest pain points you feel in relation to hiring?
What you're going to say, as the founder who's still got most of his hair. So what's the biggest pain point for hiring? I still insist on doing the final interview with every candidate we hire at SeedLegals. So that's and I explained to the candidate, this is as much for me to ask you questions as for you to ask me questions. So it's for me to, I at that point, if it's a developer, they've done the test and so on. We know, on the technical piece, all the boxes are ticked. But I'd like to make sure that each person is a cultural fit for the company. And also, these days, it's a two-way thing. It's not just I'm hiring. No, I have to sell myself. Any company, it's a symmetric market. It's not like the old days of the mill owner and the people in the town would be thankful for work. No, I have to do my hardest to persuade you to come and work at my company. So this is your opportunity to ask me, what the growth plans are and so on. And also to ask about the culture and the secret, but don't tell anybody, is when I explain to people on the call, this is your opportunity to ask me questions. It's actually the questions you ask me which are more important to me as telling the fit than the questions that I ask you.
Yeah.
And it's quite interesting to see the questions people ask, but also the research they've done beforehand. And because I'm fairly well known, people go, "Hey, Anthony, I watched a 2019 video where you said X, and, tell me about that." And I really, like that. They've done their homework. So I think, the number one thing that I see that people are looking for, I mean, I'm seeing a snapshot of people that are coming to our company, but it's a company with mission, purpose, ambition, and growth, and scale, intention. And I think these days people are not just after a job. Some people are just after a job. Some back-end engineers might be, give me a good Java stack and an interesting set of things to do, and I don't really care about anything else. But I think increasingly candidates are looking for the company to do some good in the world, and whether it be climate, or simply that it's enabling other companies to go, or something good, is much more desirable than just meh. You want to impress people that you've got that mission and purpose. You want to impress people that other people in your team are smart, enthusiastic, motivated. So everyone in the team that talks and interviews to candidates needs to have the same goal. And I must say, I'm delighted when, people say, actually, I had a question, and I asked all the people who interviewed me, and actually, they all had the same answer. Yeah, thank God.
We're aligned.
Now, by the way, one thing we didn't cover is an important one, which is, what is the value of my options? So we've explained, the vesting, the exercising, the EMI valuation, and the exercise price. But the elephant in the room is, dude, how many options am I getting? So if the company says to you, "I'm giving you 1,000 options," well, if the company's got 100,000 options, that's 0.1% or 1%. If the company's got 100 million options, that's not much. So telling you you've got N options isn't very good. On the flip side, telling you that you've got 0.1% equity doesn't sound that desirable. I mean, if you're employee number 1, it's a low number. If you're employee number 100, that's a great number, because if you have 100 employees and you give them 0.1% each, it's like 10% equity overall.
Yeah.
But I think on SeedLegals, I encourage a different approach, and we call that performance options, which is to say, I'm going to give you 50% of your salary in share options, which will vest over, 3 years. And now that it's a number that you can make sense of. So great, I'm getting £30,000 in options, as opposed to I'm getting 1,000 options, which is a meaningless number. Mm-hmm. So you should try to ask the company, if they send you your option grant and it's got, or, at interview stage, ask them how many options, and try to equate it to value rather than a number of 1,000, which could be worth a lot, or it could be worth pretty much nothing, depending on how many options the company has.
Yeah, such a good point, because the numbers are so abstract. You're right. Even for founders, how do we decide to chop up these shares into hundreds of thousands of shares? That's just an arbitrary thing. So super good to make it tangible for the candidates, and how that how they can make sense of it. Awesome. Okay.
And by the way, as a benchmark, something like 50% of your salary, 1 year's salary, in options vesting over a number of years seems a good starting point. And if the company is going to have a 3x or 5x valuation increase in the next funding round, that's pretty cool. That's like more than your annual salary. In options that you're getting.
I think we touched on it a little bit in terms of how you like to jump in at the final stage, and the questions that people ask you are really, really important. But obviously, for those people to get to you, a lot's gone on in the process for you to meet those people that usually hopefully align with your values. I just want to think about your earlier stage of your founder journey, maybe at SeedLegals or even earlier. If you could go back to day one of, let's say, SeedLegals, and give yourself one piece of advice in relation to scaling your team, hiring specifically, what would it be?
I think it's not scaling too fast. And I have to say, that's a luxury that few people have. So most founders struggle, hugely to raise any investment. they usually start with an assumption they're going to raise like £1 million and hire 20 people and so on. The reality is you raise less, and it's hard work hiring people, right? I mean, it's rare that you find, even if you wanted to hire 50 people, you don't just find 50 people tomorrow. It takes ages to hire. But nonetheless, what usually or sometimes happens is founders drink too much TechCrunch and drink too much Kool-Aid of the growth variety. And they go, great, we want to be like a unicorn. So what we're going to do is we're going to build a B2B app, and we're going to build a B2C, and then we're going to do data, and we're going to build Tableau, and we're going to have APIs. And you raise, if you're fortunate and able to do it, tons of money, and then you start scaling too fast. And you scale faster than your headspace has really understood the markets. So you're building stuff. And I've realized only retrospectively that building stuff that hasn't been fully thought through, you end up throwing a lot of it away. So, you might think, are you limited your rate of growth by the rate at which you can get funding, or the rate at which you can turn, aspiration into carefully thought through ideas? So as an example to indicate, you might say, people you want to connect our app with APIs. We need to build APIs. It sounds on its face good. You have to build APIs. So you build APIs, and only afterwards do you realize, actually, nobody cares about connecting to your app with APIs, or like 3 people want to do, and they all had vastly different needs. Or the people who want APIs don't want you updating the app. So if most of your team is incentivized, move fast, break things. The button says buy, let's change it to unlock. Okay, change that. Everyone's like thinking, what's the customer want? We'll iterate. But the folks who are using your APIs, your data, they don't want change. So you might realize in retrospect that you've essentially built stuff before you've thought about how you're going to market it. And that ends up, in my view, becoming wasted effort. And so at SeedLegals, I quite like that we're sort of rate limited by, the product and design and founder team thinking about a big backlog of items. I used to be frustrated by having a big backlog of items. It just means this is the failure of me to build all
this is
that we want to do. Exactly. And actually, I quite delight now at having a big backlog, because what it means is you want to critically starve, in a sense, the ability to build stuff. So you think super carefully about the things you build. If you just hire more people, it means that you can build more things, but they're probably not really critically evaluated. So what so all of the startup life is really about wisely picking the things you would like to do from a bigger list than you have time to do. And there are different algorithms. I mean, when I say algorithm, approaches, right? One of them is the CTO picks whatever they want. Number 2, the marketing team decide what will be built, and the tech team just better bloody build it. The other one is the CEO plays the I'm the fucking CEO card and picks what you're going to do. And these are all not good methods. So how do you pick a method? The other one is the product person or the product team have a set of candidates, and then they pick the ones they think are most important, and maybe they've got a quarterly, planner and so on. So there are all these methods. And I always joke that product development is the art of making the most people the least unhappy. Or is it picking some people who are going to be very unhappy and other people are going to be very happy? I don't know which is the right answer. It's probably some people will be very happy and others you have to explain to them why they're unhappy. Because the reality is there are always more things that you could do than you have the ability to actually do. And here exactly. And I really like to think about, it's not so much slowing down. It's about when you build something, you should have thought through how you're going to market it. Do your customers really want it? And so on, rather than going, great, we've got the technical ability to build things. We're going to build it and see if they come. Because it turns out far too often you build it and they just don't come. And at SeedLegals, we've been quite fortunate in not building many things that people don't want. But we, even within our suite of legal documents on the platform, Some of them get insane amounts of use, and some of them get modest use. Could we have not wasted our times on the things that get modest use, or are they in fact necessary because some people still need them? Anyway, to me, this is the delightful and often frustrating challenge of startup life, which is it's all about, I'm the product kind of guy. It's all about having a well thought through set of things you want to do, well prioritized, and then efficient picking and delivery of those items, where you're always focused on the most important things at any given time, where, of course, most important could mean most important to different people, right? So there's that.
I assume that there's an element of experimentation after you've chosen that route to decide, okay, at this point, after this amount of time, we need to decide if that was the right route or not, because there is an element of iteration, which goes back to maybe what some founders should be doing is testing and learning, but test one thing properly, I assume is what you're saying, after you've thought it through, and then review, rather than sticking to that route and thinking just because we planned it, it's 100% the right thing to do.
Absolutely. So changing your mind is, some people, by the way, don't like it when you change your mind. To me, changing your mind is like the most important thing. Obviously, if you put work into something and you change your mind, there's a loss of efficiency, but you may still be better off changing your mind than doggedly pursuing it. But I think this leads to a slightly different problem space, which is knowing, so if you build something and it doesn't have traction, this could mean one of several things. It could mean you've built a wonderful thing, but you just need to market and tell people about it. It could mean that you built something that's fantastic, but it needs one more feature or a few more features to be usable. Or it could mean, actually, realistically, you should just give up because nobody wants it.
Yeah.
And the biggest problem that founders have and teams have is, are you one feature away from viral takeoff, or are you just throwing more features after something that is, nobody wants the extra features?
Yeah.
And the perfect example for me is, Twitter, which is, we've always used and loved Twitter. It's a place you post some comments. They used to be 140 characters. Now they're 180, 280. And everything else that Twitter does is a complete waste of time. They may as well have not done it. Stories, discovery, buy shit you're watching on TV with one click, all this other stuff. They've got these other tabs. You never use any of them because in your mind, Twitter is a place you post something and you follow some people and you see a stream of stuff, some interesting, some annoying, and that's it. And now, obviously, their product team is going, we should build more features, and their owner is going, you should build more features. But if it doesn't sync with what your users are wanting, and this is a real problem in early stages of the company because your product isn't taking off. And is it that you're one feature away? Or do you have to actually take a step back and completely rethink your marketing message, the market? Does anyone want this? Maybe you have to pivot quite significantly. And it's really hard to know the answer to that.
Yeah. So much to consider with so very high stakes also. So I can imagine it's hugely stressful, different to us a little bit. We're a services business, so we get feedback quite quickly, and changing that service is less taxing than building a whole new product or changing so many features in one go. So it's slightly different for us. Similar to a bit of a retro in terms of a broad view on hiring specifically. I know you've hired, but you're quite removed from the day-to-day of it. Anthony, you come in right at the end, of course. But if you could fix one problem in hiring, magic wand stuff, what would it be? What problem would you fix and why?
For me, for years, I've obsessed is a bit high because I don't spend that much time in it. But it seems like there's a real mismatch between the sort of traditional hiring and the way reality works. Is so when you hire someone, there seem to be two modes for hiring. It's a permanent employee or a contractor. So permanent, there's an assumption, and it's got the word permanent in the title, that it's going to be for a long period, not for life like Toyota in the 1960s or something, but, for many years. And contractor is basically, I'm going to give you lots of money for a short period. We don't love each other. My goal is to get rid of you as soon as possible, but I need you for a while and you're expendable. So you've got these two patterns, but the reality, I think, of most startups is, as you say, the average tenure is like 18 months or something like that. So it's definitely not permanent. We're not hiring for life. And I like the concept of we're hiring for a mission. And as a startup evolves, particularly early stage ones, the way you work with other people in the team, the mission might evolve. So our mission is to build, the app. But after a while, 30 people and then 50 people, and the way it works internally is different, or maybe that project is different. So is there somewhere halfway between contractor and employee that recognizes that you're here for a mission? At some point, the mission might be over. I don't want to fire the person because that's like unpleasant for you and unpleasant for me and looks terrible on your resume and personally is a horrible thing to do. But you don't want to just quit because that's in reverse the other thing. But how might we say, actually, our goal is there's a mission. At the end of the mission, maybe we'll have another mission for you. Or maybe we don't have another mission and you should go elsewhere. Is there sort of fluidity between companies? And one of the things that, if you are changing employees or employees are changing you every 18 months statistically, then paying a recruiting company 20% of their salary is an extremely expensive and inefficient way to do it. And that's one of the things I really like with Move, where you've got a SaaS model effectively. Your marginal cost, it sounds brutal, but that's the way it is it's encouraging a new, more fluid behavior of people coming and going that matches reality. And it's not to say it's either right or wrong, but, every time if it costs me 20% of someone's annual salary, every time I want to hire somebody, I'm just going to hire fewer people and then I'm going to have them stay on because the cost of hiring someone else is so high.
Exorbitant indeed.
Yeah. Exactly. So I'm going to have team members that I'm trying to invent work for them and I'm scared that they're going to leave. Whereas if you reduce that cost, you might find, you still have hard work to find somebody and it takes work to onboard and it may not work out, but I think it's much more reflective of the reality than, yes, I'm going to pay 20% of your salary because you're going to be with us until you retire.
And here are the share options with no cliff straight away.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. You're so right. It's like changing the dynamic between you're here forever versus you're here for a certain key event, milestone / project. It's an interesting way to frame it. Obviously, people are scared about cost of living and they want secure work and they want long-term salaries. So even though in their heads they know they're not going to be with you forever, you kind of need to do this dance by saying this is a really secure place to work. But you're right. Once that person has shipped that product or the milestone event has been achieved, there should be a natural way to part company without either party losing face or losing employer brand value. So you're right. There is this like middle road that needs to be, if we were more transparent about it, I think companies could talk about it, but then they'd really struggle to hire. So that's probably stopping them.
Yeah. And I think this is based, by the way, is, if you're a product designer, tech person in London, there's a symmetry between the company trying to woo you as much as you wooing the company. It's not like the company owns all the cards and you're desperate for a job. No, you got to pick and choose.
No way, not anymore.
So exactly. And so in that, because it's symmetric, I think you might look to a method where realistically one day, someone's going to tell me, hey, Anthony, I love working at your company, but, the grass is greener over there. Why? I'm just looking to do something different. I've done the design on this product for a while.
I've helped you achieve X.
I'd recognize it.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
And I think you'll get way more quality of hire and engaged employees if that's what we lead with. So I love it as a reframing of the early talent attraction piece for sure. Brilliant. Thank you so much. It's been fantastic, Anthony. I don't know if you have any other bits to discuss, but I think there's so much there, so much content. There's about 40 blogs alone we can get off the back of this.
I've hugely enjoyed it.